You're listening to Dairy Voice by Dairy Business News, a podcast exclusively for the dairy industry.
One of our sponsors of the Dairy Voice podcast is National DHIA. NDHIA ensures information accuracy and represents their members' interests. They are the direct voice for the dairy information industry. To find out more, go to dhia.org.
Hey there, after you've finished enjoying this podcast, might I recommend you join me, Tim Hammerich, and our guests on Clarity at Work from Zoetis. We'll be talking genetics and their place on the dairy. You've got a seat at the table as we discuss innovations, what's next for the industry, and more.
I have to find the value in everything that I do, and I still find value in Clarified Plus, so we're going to continue to use it.
Just search for Clarity at Work wherever you listen to podcasts. Once you finish with this podcast, of course.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Dairy Voice podcast brought to you by Dairy Business News. I am Kate Ziehm with Morning Ag Clips, and I will be your host today on this episode. Morning Ag Clips and Dairy Business work hand in hand to serve the agricultural community and today's dairy farmer and the industry that supports them. Morning Ag Clips, a daily email and website platform, provides the quick 1-2 on what's going on in both local and national agriculture. Today, we have an exciting show for you with 3 special guests who I will introduce to you as we get rolling. I want to set the stage for what we are going to be discussing today. Risk management as it pertains to the weather and how we prepare our dairy farms. It's hard to believe as I sit here today in upstate New York at a midday temperature of 17 degrees that I will ever see green grass and 90 degrees again. But we will. It's coming. I want to make sure you're prepared so that we can minimize the amount of milk loss you suffer in your bulk tank during the heat of the summer. Last year, the Northeast experienced an extremely hot and dry summer on the heels of a very wet spring. It's all we talked about as it pertained to crop management, water management, cow management. My question is, could we have been more prepared? And that's what we're going to discuss today. From the surface, you're thinking that this is going to be an episode about signs of heat stress and weather patterns, risk management, and insurance products. It is a little bit, and yes, you will learn some things along the way or be reminded of them, but really, it's going to be how we use knowledge for power and how that power will give you peace of mind as you manage your dairy. The big question, and this is what I'm going to pose to my guests today, is how do we minimize these risk factors?
Clean, high-quality forage doesn't happen by accident. It's built from the field up. With research-proven Magniva forage inoculants from Lallemand Animal Nutrition, you can unlock clean, quality forage for your herd, every crop, every ton, every year. Magniva forage inoculants drive efficient fermentation, reduce dry matter losses, and optimize feed value and intakes, so more of what you harvest turns into performance in the bunk. Better fermentation, better stability, better use of your forage investment. Gain every advantage from field to feed with Magniva forage inoculants. Discover how Magniva can elevate your silage quality by visiting magniva.com.
I would like to introduce to you our first guest today, Gary Lezak, a weatherman from Weather 2020. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you very, very much. It's great to be here. And we're going to talk about risk windows and weather risk and how we can predict these things weeks, months in advance, up to close to a year in advance to help the dairy farmer prepare.
So Gary, tell us a little bit about your background and how you go about predicting the weather.
Yeah, I founded Weather 2020. I'm a meteorologist with the University of Oklahoma. I founded Weather 2020 about 15 years ago, like 2020 vision, we can see the future. And so, and I discovered about 40 years ago, the LRC, it was named by our bloggers 20 years ago after I started making these accurate long-range predictions, and they came through over and over again. So they named it the LRC, the Lezak recurring cycle. It's a long-range weather prediction method that is based on the idea that the atmosphere establishes a unique weather pattern every fall. So the pattern that just brought you your 17 degrees today and this relentless winter that's over and over again, the reason it's so relentless is because the pattern that's set up last October and November began cycling and has been cycling ever since. The good news is the days are getting longer. Spring is coming, and you're going to get the spring and summer versions of that pattern. What does that mean? And that's what we do at Weather 2020. We are forecasting weather risk, forecasting risk that will help industries like agriculture, dairy, and commodities make better operational financial decisions. So we predict when there will be a heat wave this summer, for example. And we can go over that forecast later. How will that impact the dairy farm, which we can talk to our expert here in a few minutes? Will it be a wet spring, a dry spring, or will it be a wet spring ending up in a hot summer? These are the things that we predict at Weather 2020.
This episode is brought to you by DRMS. DRMS is excited to launch the Fresh Cow Index, FCI, a new metric within the Herd HQ platform. FCI is featured in the Fresh Focus Transition Cow Reports inside Dairy Depot and will be available in DART in the future. FCI combines 25 individual cow variables from DHIA test day data and CDCB genetic evaluations into a single, easy-to-understand score for evaluating transition cow performance. A score of 100 indicates expected performance. Cows above 100 are outperforming predictions, while those below 100 are more likely to underperform and face early culling risk. Producers and consultants can use FCI to evaluate month-over-month changes in feeding and management, understand herd-level transition success, and drill down into Cow Compass for detailed cow-level insights. Herd HQ. See what's happening in your herd. Learn more at drms.org/herd/what-is-herd HQ.
First question is, let's go back history-wise. Did you accurately predict the summer that we had last year?
Yes, I would say yes is the first answer.
Okay.
Now, how are the specifics? How were we accurate week by week? I wouldn't say we're accurate day by day. When you look at which weeks will be wet, which weeks will be dry, that's where our accuracy gets up to 60% and higher. When will there be severe weather? A severe thunderstorm that's going to produce hail that could impact cattle and crops. Those predictions are actually near 90% accurate. I'm predicting the window, the week that's going to be really severe and the weeks that are going to be drier and not so severe. So there's an accuracy. Do we specifically predict the weather for New England perfectly last year? Perfect is certainly what we would strive to be, but we're predicting the future. So 60% accuracy is good when you're predicting something that is 30 days, 60 days, 100 days into the future. So yes, we were able to do that.
Tell me a little bit about how the tool that you've put together for predicting the weather has impacted specifically dairy farms, because that's our audience today. Have you worked with any and done that?
Yeah, we have hundreds of farmers that are now using our weather tool, which is a dashboard that allows you to narrow down to your county where your farm is at and get a forecast from now through September. So through planting, growing, and harvest seasons ahead, you'll have a forecast week by week. It's really good. And we've had quite a few farmers. A couple of years ago, one of them up in South Dakota planted early because our prediction on our tool showed that it would be a wet spring. And so they got their crops in early, and their neighbors did not get them planted early. They didn't have that tool. And then it was a little too wet to get out in the field. They planted late, and farmer A, B, and C that are our customers actually had bumper crops compared to the people that got their crops in later. So there's a lot of testimonials like that we have, and that's what we do basically.
Because I tend to be scientifically oriented, tell us a little bit, Gary, about weather patterns, about how the atmosphere sets up. Why is it every fall that it sets up for the next year?
There may be some astronomical reasons, and I'm sure there is some astronomical reasons to why the pattern is cycling and regularly. In astronomy, you have the Earth rotates on its axis once every 24 hours, a perfect 24-hour cycle. The Earth rotates around the sun once every 365 days, roughly, and that's a 365-day cycle. And at the equator, you have equal day and night, 12 hours each. And so you have these perfect cycles at the equator, and then these quarter cycles and half cycles. So astronomers are so great at predicting, not the weather, but at predicting astronomy. They know when an eclipse is going to be down to the second 100 years from now. Weather, similarly, is cycling. And what I discovered is that the weather pattern is cycling regularly, right around a dozen days after the sun sets at the North Pole, around September 22nd, 23rd every year, around October 5th, 6th, or 7th, we've identified as a day one of each year's pattern. So it's probably not a coincidence. I can't prove that it's because the sun set at the North Pole, but astronomical reasons, ocean temperatures, land-ocean differences in temperatures, something happens in the fall where the pattern sets up, and the pattern we're in now was identified for California to be wet, for example, this winter, and they're getting hit by a big storm, a whole series of storms as we're talking. And then the Northeast, the relentless winter, the cold outbreaks, and then the snowstorms that have been hitting are on schedule. And that same pattern is going to continue through spring and summer, but it sets up in the fall. A cycle develops. Last year was about 6 weeks long. This year actually is much longer. The tides for the longest cycle I've ever monitored, it's 11 weeks long, but that entire pattern repeats over and over again, and it allows us for our tool to show the forecast, and then for us to provide weather intelligence to open up these risk windows of the cattle might have heat stress and other impacting weather conditions.
OneTrack is a new choice for progressive dairies looking to simplify feeding practices and elevate performance. Fed at up to 40% of the ration, this high-energy macro ingredient works alongside on-farm ingredients to reduce sourcing, mixing, and batching, freeing up valuable time and resources. For more information, go to OneTrack, that's TRAK, right.com. That's ONETRAKRIGHT.com.
So now, Gary, some of those larger weather-related incidents, like the really large storms, the wind that comes through, when you see these weather patterns and how they shift and how they're setting up for the year, can you actually look at a year and say, wow, I think this is going to be a doozy for this area?
Yes. For example, last year was roughly a 6-week cycle. So severe thunderstorms last year, not this past Christmas season, but 2 Christmases ago, there were over 100 tornadoes that occurred in a big outbreak on December 28th. Winter outbreaks are not extremely rare. They do happen. When that happened, you line up that with 6 weeks later, and then 6 weeks later after that, and 6 weeks later after that, and you can predict, and we did predict, when that part of the pattern would return. March 14th, 15th, 16th, about 6 weeks later, major deadly tornado outbreak. 6 weeks later, severe weather happened again in the similar regions. So we're making these predictions. Severe weather is just an example of when the worst of the weather is going to happen. And then it happens. So instead of having 1 day or 3 days to prepare, you will have 3 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe even up to 3 or 6 months to prepare.
Okay. So with that, we're going to shift to our dairy farmer and get his take on all of this. I'd like to introduce to you guys Justin Ohlde. He's a dairy farmer from North Central Kansas. Justin, welcome to the episode today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Tell us a little bit about your operations so that the audience can orient themselves on what you're managing every day.
We've actually got a couple different sites here in North Central Kansas. I grew up on the farm milking 50 cows, 80 cows. Like Grandpa started, like a lot of Midwest farms. Now we're milking about 4,400 cows on 3 sites in northern Kansas, and there's actually one in southeast Nebraska. Farm, raise heifers, and so yeah, it's probably a typical Midwest farm. Just been growing. So
now, do you grow your crops or do you buy?
We grow about 50-50.
So tell us a little bit about your experience with really bad weather and your dairy herd and some times in your past in which the weather really impacted the bottom line.
Yeah, it's farming, so you're always playing the weather lottery. Yeah, there'd be multiple times. We've had late hailstorms come through and decimated a corn crop that was almost done. We've had that happen in the springtime. We've had late freezes. We've had, it's too wet to get on the field. 2019 was just a crazy year as far as trying to get anything done because it was so wet. A little bit of everything here in Kansas.
Just to familiarize ourselves, I was able to have a conversation with Dan Coulott, a veterinarian with DFA and Agri-Services recently, but we were talking a little bit about the effect that heat has on dairy cattle and what it means, like where's the cow's happy spot temperature-wise, which is affected by the humidity, but pretty much it's that 55-degree zone, plus or minus 10 degrees, depending on what the humidity is and what the conditions are that the cow is living in for housing and just patterns on the dairy farm. Dan mentioned to me, which I thought was very interesting, is that making it part of the entire team to consider how do we make sure that we can get as close to 55 degrees in terms of an environment that our cows are in every day, and making it a team goal, which I thought was great. Making it, we get caught up in the day-to-day management aspects of our dairy farms, milking, managing employees, managing barns. But I thought it was interesting that he brought that goal to the surface for the team on dairy farms to consider and what things can be done to ensure that cows are in that environment on a more regular basis, knowing that these weather patterns hit depending on where the dairy farm is located in the U.S., north, south, east, west. There was one thing that he said, and I'll ask you, Justin, if you have one on your farm, but he said one of the most important tools that he uses is an anemometer. Do you have one, Justin?
I have a tool that measures wind, and that's about all I have.
And that's it. Well, I must say, for those of you who do or don't have an anemometer and what it is, Dan he loves that tool because it measures wind, temperature, humidity, and in many factors, the amount of light that your cows are exposed to. He uses it as a tool, and he encourages dairy farmers to use it every day so they get an idea on patterns. And then he said, use those patterns to help your farm business make management decisions to consider how we get those cows to that 55 degrees as consistently and regularly as possible. And I thought that was a great message because, again, going back to the beginning of this today, it's about knowledge is power. Gary, you speak to the anemometer because you're the weather guy, but talk to us a little bit about some of the tools that you can give a dairy farmer to help manage those things.
Yeah, the anemometer does measure wind, and then there's other instruments that are included. So when you see an anemometer, you'll see the wind vane. It'll tell you which direction it's going, and those little cups spinning around. That's the anemometer measuring the wind speed and direction. And then the other tools that measure the humidity and the temperature and the amount of light coming in. I haven't measured that myself yet, but that's just part of the weather instruments that are also included that might be attached to the anemometer. So, but yeah, it's great. I mean, I grew up in Southern California, always fascinated by weather. And the first thing I got was this weather instrument my dad got me when I was really very excited and interested about the weather. So it's a very important tool to have because you want to know what direction the wind is coming from and different conditions. You know, I haven't thought about the different conditions inside and outside of the barn. I'm sure that Justin can talk to that, but it's all important. The more information you have, the data that you have on your farm is important.
So Justin, talk to us a little bit, because I know that you tune in to the weather and Gary and what he has to say about the patterns. What are some changes that you've been able to implement on your farm with what he says, and has it helped?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just goes back to preparation, planning, because obviously he hasn't figured out how to actually control the weather yet. Some of the things that we've done on the cattle side is, you always need to be ready for summertime, but it's like, hey, we might be a little bit delayed this year, a little bit early. Make sure you got the fans going, the sprinklers going, all those types of things to feed cows to help with that summer heat. And, for those things to work optimally, I mean, depending on the product, it's like you want them in so many days before it gets hot. Well, they're also kind of expensive, so you don't want to just sit there and feed it for 2 months before you have to do it, right? So it's like with some of the tools, it's just like, hey, there's going to be a heat spell. It's probably going to warm up about this time. So it's like, okay, well, now I can go, if you need 2 weeks or whatever the parameters are on your products, it's like, okay, I'm going to start feeding this at this point in time to maximize the value out of it and minimize the cost. Flies coming out, that's another big thing. It's like there's some preventative things you can do for flies. It's like, okay, if you have a better idea of when they're coming, I mean, it helps with the timing on the dairy side significantly. The other part is, production. It's like, okay, it's going to be somewhat of a hot year or cooler year or whatever the case might be. So you kind of have a little bit of plan on the production side on the cows. All of our cows are in free stalls, cross fence, and so forth. That we have minimized the weather, but still it's like lagoon levels and pump outs and some different things like that. It's like, hey, there might be a short window this year to get this done. Let's make sure that we're really on it at this point in time. And then as far as buying feed, growing feed, he alluded to earlier about, well, when you want to plant, is there going to be a late freeze this year? Is it going to be a wet spring or a dry spring? A lot of those different tools that you can use to make different decisions. Or it's like, hey, it might be a short crop this year, so I need to talk to some neighbors and can get another couple fields of corn, make sure I got enough silage. So it's good information, and people can definitely use it depending on their situation.
Gary, in a conversation that we had earlier, we were thinking about putting this out there. You mentioned that farmers will get the Weather 2020 tools, and it will take them time to actually activate that knowledge into helping out their operation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, as soon as you trust that our forecasts are going to be accurate 3 weeks, 6 weeks, or 3 months in advance, then you can put in your plan and not wait and react. You're proactive. Can we anticipate the timing of those risk windows early enough to prepare? That's a big question. And with long-range cycle forecasting, producers can plan cooling strategies, feed adjustments, water management, which weeks are going to be wet, which weeks are going to be dry ahead of time. In the year that our farmers have, and these are hundreds of farmers now that have been following us, about 6 months to a year later, they're like, oh my gosh, this actually is verifying accurate enough so they can start planning and planting that bumper crop while your neighbors don't. So there's definitely advantages to know and to help out with problems that could come up.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you said once farmers start to trust that weather forecast is when they can actually mobilize into action.
Right. And I think Justin will agree that he knows it's going to get hot this summer. Okay, we all know that's going to happen.
Mhm.
But could there be an impacting heat wave? Right now, we've identified one centered around the first week of August. Will be a 5-day heat wave or a 15-day heat wave. The part of the pattern that produces that heat wave that we have in our forecast now for near the end of July and the first half of August, that part of the pattern will cycle through in May. So when it cycles through in May, we're going to monitor it closely. It'll heat up, possibly dry out. What we call an omega block might form in the pattern. And that, when that happens, it'll increase our confidence. We're already 75% confidence in this heat wave that's going to develop. And how can you prepare for that now? Yes, you know it's going to get hot, but there may be some extra materials you can have on hand and ready to go.
Instead of the tail wagging the dog, it's the dog wagging the tail. I like to refer to it. I'd like to pivot and introduce to our audience Jordan Wallen, who comes to us from Agri-Services Insurance Agency. She's going to talk a little bit about risk management. Insurance is something that many of us lament at times when we write the premium, but we have it because it's a tool for risk management. And I wanted to bring Jordan on today just to talk to us a little bit about how dairy farmers are managing severe weather patterns and its effect on their farms, and how insurances may be able to help.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Kate. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you today. And as you said, insurance can be not a fun thing. I get that very much in dealing with it day to day. I know it's not everybody's favorite topic, or they probably don't love when the insurance guy shows up at their house or farm. So I get it. Trust me. But yeah, like you said, we in the insurance world, we're trying to manage our risk and what the risks out there can do to our operations. And as it relates to heat and weather, we've partnered with a very cool new company, Air Parametric, that has rolled out what they call the Milkshake program, which is a heat stress insurance coverage. And as I'm sure Justin could speak to very, very easily, when there are extended periods of heat, especially heat paired with humidity, that can have a negative effect on dairy cows. It can hurt production. It can hurt components loss. You can just rack up bills for extra things, as Justin talked about, the types of medicine they may be given to their cows in advance of it. A heat wave can be expensive, as he mentioned. So this program, the Milkshake program, can help recoup some of those costs in the event of what the Milkshake team calls a triggering heat event. So it's a new product. It's very focused on these heat stress incidents.
Tell me a little bit about what is a triggering event.
Yep. So a triggering event is what is considered a triggering event. Can be a number of different days. It can be either a 7-day event, a 5-day event, or a 3-day event. And those are all based with the THI number, which is a temperature humidity index. And that THI number is different for every farm. It's based on the location of your farm, and that is measured within 5 to 10 miles of your farm. This program offers 3 or 4 different THI trigger numbers, which again is just a combination of heat and humidity. It's not exactly like the feels like temperature, but same kind of idea. If you find yourself hitting that THI trigger number for either a 7, 5, or 3-day rolling average, that is considered a triggering event.
So how does a dairy farmer benefit from hitting those events? Is it measured in what normal milk production typically is in a day and what that loss is? How is that made up?
Yep. So the coverage amount is made up by taking a rough estimate of the number of cows you have, working that backwards to figure out what roughly a week's worth of revenue is. And you can insure up to half of that. You can insure down to lower amounts if you'd like, but they can go up as high as half.
And so it varies on if you drop 10 pounds in milk on average per cow. That's
another very nice thing about this product is in the event of a triggering heat event, The claims process is very simple. I'm sure everyone out there has had a claim on a car or their house, or dairy farmers on a multitude of different things where you've had to provide documentation and values and depreciation. With the milkshake program, there is none of that. There is simply, you experienced a triggering heat event. Did you experience any loss? And that can be, like I said, loss in production, loss of components, extra costs related to keeping the cows cool. If that is the case, you check yes. The full coverage amount listed on your policy for either, whether it was a 7-day, 5-day, or 3-day event, and those coverages all vary a little bit, would then be sent to you. So it's a very simple claims process as well.
Interesting. It's such a new and interesting concept. Justin, walk us through a little bit heat events at your farm. How many days does it usually take before you're seeing a difference in what the cows are making for milk?
Varies upon a lot of factors.
Yep.
Early on in the summertime, the cows can hold on a lot better than later. You get a couple days over, especially get over 90. Honestly, you get to upper 80s with the high humidity. Cows struggle a lot with that. The thing that really gets us in the summertime is the overnight temps.
Yeah.
If we can get below 60 degrees, 65, somewhere in there, cows can hold on to a lot. If you start getting over 70, or you get these nasty spells when you can't get under 80 degrees at night, cows don't last very long. I mean, they got no reprieve from the heat. It's very rough on them.
And I know how I feel when the temperature doesn't drop at night. I'm not an air conditioner kind of person. So outside doesn't get down into the 60s. You can bet the next day I'm feeling tired and sluggish. So I can't imagine pumping out that much milk that our dairy cows produce today and keeping that up during those times of high temperatures. Justin, just because I'm always interested, how much does your water intake increase?
30 to 50%.
Yeah.
It's significant.
And making sure you've got plenty of water. I know that last year we struggled with that with our hot summer, just making sure the wells were running at full capacity all the time and able to keep up with the water intake. Jordan, this product, it's based off of milk loss, but also increased costs of keeping milk production up during those periods of time?
Correct. So as Justin just said, with the 30 to 50% increase in water usage, that can lead to higher bills. So that right there is that's in the check yes column for increased costs or loss that would be covered by this program.
And if we can look into a crystal ball and get a good sense of what's coming towards us in the future during the seasons that are so impactful for dairy farmers in particular, which is spring, summer, and fall, I can imagine that would be a great way to prepare. But it sounds like with what you have going on with the milkshake product, it's also another layer of preparation. And I'm sure our listeners are thinking, oh, but what's the premium associated with that? Any thoughts on that, Jordan, that you want to make us feel a little better about?
Yeah, well, first off, the premiums can be very affordable. Just running and then the other nice thing is the quotes can be done in a matter of minutes. This isn't, again, when you think about as a dairy farmer working on insurance quotes, it's a long process, requires a lot of information. Not the case with the milkshake program. It's how many cows do you milk and what's the address you're at? And I can turn a quote around in a couple of minutes. And so again, with the pricing, you're looking, take 1,000 cow dairy, you're looking at a low end price option. And again, this is an estimate because it's all very individualized based on where in the country you are. But you're looking down to the $1,000 to $1,500 range for the least expensive option. And now there are anywhere from 10 to 15 options per farm, so you can increase that premium to cover a more likely event. But the least expensive premium can be as low as $1,000 to $1,500 for 1,000 cow dairy. In the scope of things, and that's a coverage that runs from May to October, and that covers the whole summer season for you.
May to October. And is that a premium that you pay through the whole year, or you just pay during those months?
You can stretch it out to pay it over those months, but there are different payment options that we can work with you on.
Thank you for that. I know insurance is something that is is a challenge because we pay money every month. What I find is that we never want to have to use our insurance because that is usually a crisis situation, an unforeseen situation. You can bet that on any given day, there is some farm that is experiencing an unexpected loss. And how great it is that that premium money that you've been paying into is helping that farm get back on its feet. Thank you for making us aware of that product, Jordan. So I just want to bring it back around. We've talked about the weather. We've talked about its effect on milk production in our dairy cows. And we've talked about how we can help reduce risk during these weather patterns that seem relentless on our dairy cows and milk production goes down. I just want to end today. I want to give each of you just a moment, your take home that you hope the listener gets from this conversation today. If there's just one thing that you want to impart on them, what would it be? Gary, I'll start with you.
Well, first of all, Jordan, an interesting topic with your milkshake product. I think it's fascinating. And I would like to know, just ask you a question about if this past summer, a year ago, we would have said there's 3 or 4 3 and 5 day stretches of where they might want to get the insurance in your milkshake product. This summer, we're expecting that major heat wave that could be a couple of 7-day long periods. So it's probably good news for your business that we can say that there's a bigger risk. But that's my takeaway right now, is just marrying what Weather 2020 is doing with a client, a potential partner like Jordan with this milkshake product on predicting those windows. We have the ability to predict those 3-day and 5-day and 7-day risks, and with enough accuracy that could maybe prepare the end user, the farmer, the dairy farmer, to get the right coverage.
You learned something today, Gary. That's good. But also, just to bring it back around, just having an understanding of where the weather patterns are going to be settling for the year does help a dairy farmer make decisions.
The weather pattern is cycling. We're going to go into spring and summer. We're learning a lot more as every week goes by. We already know what the weather pattern is going to look like at each location around the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, which is a different cycling pattern down there in Brazil and Argentina. But we already know what the pattern is going to look like. But what does that mean? When will these risk windows appear? And that's what we're predicting. And we'll learn in the next few weeks, we'll be able to have all those risks out there. One of our products that you can learn about Weather 2020 and really gain confidence in the cycling pattern, it's weather2020.substack.com. That's weather2020.substack.com. It's less than $1 a day, and you can join there and learn in the next year how valuable this information is for you.
Justin, what would you like to share with your compadres, dairy farmers?
Dairy, like a lot of things, just continually more, I don't know, competitive is the right word, but you're always trying to out produce things because there's always less and less, it seems like, per animal, per unit out there. It's just the way of the world. So yeah, I think you're always looking for things that can give you an advantage, some ways to plan, different ways to think about how you run and manage your operation, different water products, different insurance products, or whatever that might be.
Jordan, you're up. What would you like to say as the person who has an interesting product to bring to the market as a way to manage some risk?
Yeah, I think my main takeaway is just that information is a good thing. And the more information you can soak up and the information you can get from Gary. And when you're a farmer and like in Justin's position, you guys know best what happens on your farm. But if you can pair that with information from people like Gary, people like myself with new insurance products or just the existing insurance products, work with the teams you have and just use all the information you can. I learned some things today. So, I mean, it's just stacking more and more information on top of each other can only help you make better, more informed decisions. So as far as I'm concerned, please use us as a tool. If we can provide you with any more information to help you guys make the best decision for your operation, that's our goal. If you'd like to learn more about the Milkshake heat stress insurance coverage, you can go to milkshake milksakeins.com. That's milksakeins.com.
Thank you. We're going to bring it back around to risk management today. The thing that I got out of our conversation is that the more you can do to prepare yourself and your dairy business, the better off you will be and you will feel. You will have clarity and your team will too. And with that clarity on how to manage during these severe weather patterns that could possibly come our way, comes a peace of mind. You will feel on top of things and as ready as possible for the situations that Mother Nature may throw at you. Knowledge is power. Make sure you do something with it to set yourself and your dairy business up for success. I want to thank you to our guests, Gary, Justin, and Jordan, and thank you to our audience for tuning in and making this one of the most respected industry podcasts since 2019. If you enjoyed today's conversation and do believe that knowledge is power, be sure to subscribe to your Morning Ag Clips to gain the latest local and national ag news, insights, ag stories, and all the ag in between. This episode is brought to you by DairyVoice and the Morning Ag Clips. And remember, if you aren't subscribed, go to morningagclips.com to get your state-specific edition today. And please, feel free to reach out if you have any comments or questions pertaining to today's podcast or agriculture and communications in general. I love connecting with readers and listeners alike. Have a great day.